Hello, this is Wade Frazier. This is January 27th, 2026, 9:39 a.m. We're going to take a break from our oral history of my journey to discuss a familiar topic to my readers and watchers. In 1990, as I was beginning my media studies, I subscribed to the Christic Institute's newsletter. Daniel Sheehan, he's the one who founded Christic Institute, and they got wiped out, which I'll get to a little bit. Uh, in my recent eulogy post on Michael Parenti, I linked to an interview video with Stephen Greer. And I found myself thinking of an interview that I read in 2017 with Sheehan. And Sheehan's story of how he was drawn into the UFO issue is unique. He was basically recruited by Jimmy Carter, soon after he became president, to gain access to the Vatican's UFO archives, which the CIA and the Vatican both rebuffed Carter's efforts to get a hold of UFO information. And Sheehan eventually, because of all this, he ended up in a room with Project Blue Books, classified evidence. The Project Blue Books was the big UFO study. And during his hour with the evidence, he feverishly saw through all these boxes of evidence and found photographs of the Air Force's recovery of a crashed alien craft. And actually, he traced some of the hieroglyphics on some of the pieces of the wreckage. Then I listened, and it's a couple of days ago, I listened to Sheehan had an interview on Coast to Coast AM last year. I knew that the Christic Institute, the lawsuit that put it out of business, where it was essentially waging two journalists were waging a lawsuit because of the bombing of a press conference, Contra press conference in Nicaragua. Um, and they were going after the CIA, et cetera. And I think the judge was CIA asset or something. So anyway, and they fined him they laid $1 million levy on him. A frivolous lawsuit is eventually called. And so, in fact, the plaintiff thought that Sheehan strategically threw his net too widely. He shouldn't have pursued. He thought he shouldn't have pursued the JFK angle, et cetera. In fact, I heard about that. I heard about Sheehan was pursuing the JFK assassination angle. But I never pursued it until I watched his Coast to Coast AM, listened to his Coast to Coast AM interview, and he confirms Gary Wean's story and then some. So, as my readers know, my policeman friend Gary Wean, who gave me the advice to help me spring my partner from jail with his $1 million bail. Gary heard from Senator John Tower 3 weeks after the JFK assassination that Lee Harvey Oswald was a military intelligence operative who was recruited by E. Howard Hunt into an operation to stage a fake assassination attempt on Fidel Castro to justify an invasion of Cuba. Gary published his book in '87. I heard he first talked about it at all in the early '70s, I believe, after he was railroaded out of his career. And then in 1997, 10 years after Gary published his book, Operation Northwoods was declassified. And Northwoods was the Joint Chiefs of Staff's plan to stage fake terror incidents in the United States to frame Fidel Castro for him to justify an invasion of Cuba. In fact, Gary's account in the Operation Northwoods even have some of the same identical language, such as remember the Maine incident. So, comparing Gary's account versus Northwood should reveal all reasonable doubt about Gary's story. And the story I heard Sheehan tell on Coast to Coast was almost identical to Gary's story, but with some interesting differences. and I'm in this post, I'm going to discuss some of them. Interestingly, Sheehan's account agrees with I had an opinion um, that JFK was taken out. It's the last straw thing related to and trying to end the Cold War, particularly joint mission to the moon. And I think, as Hunt said, Kennedy was probably going to debrief the Soviet Union on extraterrestrials, what he knew about it, and that seems to have been the last straw. Um, yeah. So Sheehan also, and I've heard this kind of stuff before, where Sheehan thinks that Watergate was related to the JFK hit, and it was almost a continuation of it. And E. Howard Hunt is the common denominator between both those operations, so could well be true. And I don't know what all Sheehan's evidence is, but makes perfect sense. Also, in the last couple of days, as I was doing this, I watched a discussion in 2020 between Stephen Greer and Sheehan, in which Sheehan discussed George Bush I and Jimmy Carter. You know, George Bush I was the head of the CIA when Carter became president. And again, Carter asked to get the CIA's files on UFOs, and Bush rebuffed him. And Sheehan said that Bush offered to never run for public office again if he could run the CIA for the rest of his career, kind of become a J. Edgar Hoover of the CIA. But what was really interesting in this interview Sheehan gave was that, and that's the first time I've seen anybody else really say this. He said that Oswald was part of a false flag operation. In fact, recruited by E. Howard Hunt. I mean, the names. And so the Cuban exiles and framing Castro for an assassination attempt. Again, it's Gary's account. And in Gary's account, Tower said that Oswald was supposed to just fire a few shots in there and go into hiding. With the false trail to Cuba, they'd do the rest to frame Castro. Sheehan said that Oswald really did make a shot. In fact, the Tague fragment, which I've discussed before, which was one of the bystanders in Dealey Plaza, got hit by debris from a bullet. And that injury actually forced the Warren Commission to concoct the magic bullet theory, because they had to do it with 3 bullets. So if one bullet hit this guy, then the other 2 had to do all the damage to Kennedy and Connolly, which is where the crazy magic bullet theory came from, or the single bullet theory. But I think magic bullet is appropriate. Sheehan said that Oswald actually shot it. So he said, again, as Tower said, again, Oswald actually did make a shot or 3, 1 or 2 or 3 shots. And Oswald was shocked as anybody that there were other shooters there that actually killed JFK when he was making his shot. And that conflicts, and this is a common thing. There are so many strands of evidence, so many different testimonies, and there's testimony that Oswald was sitting in the book depository lunchroom when Kennedy was shot, or another one that he was standing outside with the crowd watching the motorcade go past when Kennedy was shot. And that one, I think, is pretty sure is mistaken identity. The one in the lunchroom, again, maybe the person's recollection wasn't perfect. I don't know. And so you see these little contradictions. And my guess is that people's recollections were not quite perfect. You might guess. Or maybe somebody else shot from the depository window. And there's all sorts of ways that could all be, how to say it, the case, So again, no way that those kind of contradictions undermine the incredible similarity between not only Gary's account, but Northwood's, and now Sheehan's story. So Sheehan, his story was that it was Cuban exiles with mobsters. And so Sheehan got almost his information from mobsters who told him what was happening. Well, Gary was a cop, so I hope he has a little more credibility than mobsters, but essentially it's the same story. Yeah, and again, Gary wasn't, again, the John Tower conversation wasn't about who did it. It was about who didn't do it, which was Oswald. Yeah, so when Tower, talked to Gary 3 weeks after the assassination, he said he didn't know who did it. And again, the documentation that Tower gave Gary, I think Gary eventually opened it and showed that Prescott Bush, George Bush's first dad, was involved with Tower in the fake assassination attempt. And Gary said, I don't know what Gary's evidence was. Maybe it was from those documents, but I would suspect not, though, because Tower didn't really know who interposed it. But Gary thought that Arlen Specter and William D. Cohen interposed it, who both became senators. Yeah, this is promotions all around for all the people getting their hands dirty. A common theme, as my story in Ventura County makes very clear. As Sheehan said that Kennedy got hit by 2 bullets. He probably misspoke. It was at least 3. Kennedy got hit in the back, in the neck, or the throat, the back, and the head, and maybe 2 shots in the head. So, and then Connolly got hit. So, as I said before, I think Kennedy died in a hail of bullets. Interestingly, though, Tower, because there was a policeman named J.D. Tippit who was killed in Dallas about an hour after the assassination, and Oswald was always the one who was blamed for that shooting Tippit. And in the Tower conversation, Tower said that he knew that Oswald would have never shot a policeman. Except maybe the policeman's trying to kill you. Maybe you shoot back. So what Sheehan said was that Tippit's job was to kill Oswald. In fact, Gary thought Ruby's job was to kill Oswald. And so anyway, both accounts agree that Oswald was supposed to be killed before he could be captured, so they could close the loop. There would be no investigation. It'd be, all easily covered up. That's and yeah, Gary and Sheehan are both agree on that. And so exactly what happened with Tippit, exactly who shot him, that's open to debate, I would say. So yeah, maybe Oswald did shoot Tippit in self-defense. Maybe. I wasn't there. So Decker. So it's interesting that Tippit may have been the intended assassin of Oswald. When again, the meeting that Gary had with Tower, also Bill Decker, the sheriff of Dallas County, and Gary's investigative partner, and Gary's close friend Audie Murphy, were all at this meeting with Tower there in December '63. And when they were before Decker invited them to eventually come and meet Tower, Decker said that he was positive that there was no conspiracy in the Dallas Police Department around the assassination. He just thought it was funny, but would have told him that was going on. Well, Decker may have been wrong. So if Tippit was really trying to murder Oswald, then he was a part of the conspiracy. And then the third backyard photograph that ended up in the custody of Roscoe White's widow. And White was actually serving in the Marines with Oswald. In fact, was on the same boat as Oswald going over to Asia. So in fact, the evidence is quite suggestive that the backyard photographs is actually Roscoe White's body with Oswald's face pasted on. So, and he was another Dallas policeman. So Decker may have been wrong about that. About, there was nothing funny going on in the Dallas police force. In fact, Ruby shooting Oswald in the basement of the Dallas police station, is more evidence that Dallas police were involved. And if that's the case, then Decker was totally out of the loop. So yeah, back to JFK being out of the loop on this fake assassination that turned into a real one. So yeah, being out of the loop seems to be a theme here. And again, so Sheehan named Hunt. Yeah, so Sheehan's story is almost identical to Gary's. It's almost, again, it's very close to being the same story with, again, a few minor details that they both report slightly differently. But I mean, I think those are easy discrepancies, easily explained discrepancies. Yeah, I don't think none of them in any way impugn Gary, or again, the big news should be the almost identical nature of Sheehan's story and Gary's story. And the Northwoods document. I doubt that Sheehan would have a problem with Gary's encounters with Jack Ruby in the 40s. So again, Ruby was a high-ranking mobster. He wasn't some low-level nightclub owner that the Warren Commission portrayed him as. And I don't know what Sheehan might have to say about Mickey Cohen and Menachem Begin's plan to use Marilyn Monroe as a part of an intelligence and blackmail scheme on JFK. And, so Ruby was definitely involved in the real assassination. His job was to shut Oswald up before he could talk. Again, because Oswald survived to be captured, was apparently was not the plan. And Ruby was a Jewish gangster. Again, really tied, and Ruby was tied with Mickey Cohen. Mickey Cohen was tied with Menachem Begin, who was eventually Prime Minister of Israel. Gary caught Cohen and Begin talking a lot about Kennedy. They were really obsessed about what Kennedy's stance to Israel was. And so Israel, again, Gary began the Jews did it, or the Israel did it hypothesis of the JFK hit. And books have been written about that hypothesis. And Gary's one who really originated it because of his experiences. Cohen and Begin and Ruby and Monroe, this kind of thing. And so was Israel involved or not? Wouldn't surprise me. Were they the masterminds? I doubt it. So I don't know what Sheehan would have had to say about that stuff. Interestingly, Sheehan also named Allen Dulles as an architect of the assassination. He gave the green light for the assassination team to do what they did. Wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And according to Rodney Stitch's reporting on the wiretap of J. Edgar Hoover, Dulles was involved in the planning of the JFK hit, along with Nelson Rockefeller, Lyndon Johnson, Dulles, Johnson, Rockefeller, Bush the first was apparently involved. Bush keeps popping up. He was involved in Bay of Pigs. He pops up here in the JFK assassination, pops up in UFOs, the CIA. So and his dad involved in the fake assassination, Bush involved in Bush was involved in the real one. Man, all right, that's it. The truth is in there somewhere. Okay, that's my opinion. All those, but we'll never know how all those dots connect exactly. I don't think that'll ever be fully revealed. It's all too much been covered up. Too many, and again, everybody's dead who was involved pretty much. So in my opinion, JFK's murder was Dwight Eisenhower's warning about the medical or the military industrial complex just before he left office. This was his warning come to fruition. And all his presidents since then were puppets and knew it. And so, and I doubt that Sheehan has much doubt about the global elite. We had many encounters with them, unfortunately. And they used actually a CIA official as the errand boy to deliver $1 billion offer to Dennis to fold their operation before they stopped playing nicely. So anyway, and that's about all I have to say. And again, but listening to Sheehan's testimony was amazing to me to see one more confirmation of Gary's testimony. As I said, I've never seen good evidence ever contradict his reporting of the Tower conversation. I've never seen anything. Everything that's since come out just keeps confirming Gary's conversation with John Tower. And so my question is, when will Gary's testimony receive the attention that it deserves? It's still ignored or dismissed in the mainstream particularly, but mainstream dismisses anything other than the lone nut. But even in the assassination community, Gary's testimony is denied, dismissed, belittled, all this kind of stuff. And it really that's a disservice to the truth. That's a disservice to really trying to find out the truth. And so, so this is one more. So to me, Sheehan's testimony. There's one more pile. There's another part of the pile of evidence that shows that Gary recounted his John Tower conversation to the best of his recollection. But yeah, Gary was telling the truth. And so, yeah, Oswald was, who wants to argue Oswald was a lone nut in light of all of that? They got a difficult task ahead of them to do that. So, anyway, that's all I have to say for now. So, bye.